Okay, so we want to preface this by saying that we're not just talking religion. We're not just talking the way as a congregation as their way of looking at things. Although, God willing, that's true. But what we're talking about is, what does the Bible say? And when we talk about what does the Bible say, every faith, every Christian denomination, even every Jewish denomination says that we follow the Bible literally and whatever it says. But there is a truth to the intent, but there's a problem with that for other reasons, which I won't go into right now. But that is what we have. That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to understand what the Bible has to say for itself. And we do this by starting at the front of the book. We don't start in Matthew, we don't start in Ezekiel, we start in Genesis. And all of the other books, if the Bible is consistent from cover to cover, will say the same principles as we find in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. It's just a matter of the principles, the foundation is built in the early chapters, and the rest of the Bible is built on top of that foundation. So, we have to have, if the foundation is a square foundation, then the structure that's built on the foundation probably needs to be square, right? In order to fit properly and all that. Well, what's happened in religion, both in Judaism and Christianity, is that instead of having a square building on a square foundation, we have a triangular building. We have a circular building. We have whatever shape you want to choose except square. We have that kind of building sitting on top of a square foundation. And sometimes it doesn't match very well, and there's all kinds of problems. You're going to have water leaking around it when it rains and all kinds of stuff. So you're going to have all kinds of remedial stuff to do just to make up for the fact that they don't fit. And so we're trying to get away from that lack of consistency between the foundation and the rest of the structure. So today's conversation is about what is a Gentile. The question, what is a Gentile? Now, how I sent that out to most of you. I hope you got it, and I hope you read it. I'm not going to grade you on whether you read it or not, but it's kind of prerequisite for this. That's why I sent it out early. However, I can summarize it real quick here, but we're going to go through it we're going to go through it too in a PowerPoint presentation. But this comes from the document. The term Gentile, we're really confused about the term Gentile because in our modern way of using it, and even how the dictionary defines it, it doesn't fit the Bible's use of it, of the Hebrew word that's translated as Gentile. So the term Gentile came to be known as anyone whose family identity was from a descendant family group other than from Jacob. Now, when I say a descendant family group, don't worry about that right now. We'll talk about that shortly. But it was either Jacob or it wasn't. It's a very clear contrast in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament structure, is that if you were a Gentile, you weren't Jacobian. You were not genetically Jacob. You were somebody else. And so it's that strict contrast between Jacobian, Jacob, Israel, and not. So if you didn't have clear roots in Israel, you were Gentile. But that's not how the word was originally used in the Hebrew. And we'll go into that real soon. In essence, then, there were two categories of mankind. The Yahweh covenanted family of Jacob and all others. What was Yahweh's commitment to this chosen? And the Hebrew word for that's translated as Gentile is goy, which is a singular, or goyim, which is the plural. So what was Yahweh's commitment to this chosen goyim of Jacob? It was forever, in spite of their propensity to fail in that relationship. Yahweh never said, I'm not committed anymore. His commitment maintained constancy even when they failed. And even as they are failed today, his commitment is to Jacob. Yahweh was committed to preserve this chosen firstborn of humanity despite their propensity to sin against that relationship. Yahweh himself declared that he would preserve them only because of his ability to remain faithful and to covenant, not because they could. His covenant was based upon his ability, not upon their ability. So in that sense, it was a unilateral covenant. He said, I'm committed. I want you guys to be committed too, but good luck with that. And he actually said that. Remember when Moses brought the law down to them, uh, he spoke it out to the people, and then Moses went back to the Lord and said, the people have said, I do. And Yahweh said, I'm glad they said that, but only I wish they had the heart to do it. Right? So he said, basically he was saying, good luck with that, but I want them to do it. So Yahweh's commandment was to unilaterally purify the hearts of his chosen goyim, so that at the appointed time, the relationship would become eternally mutual. And that time, that appointed time, is in our future. That is when we get the incorruptible bodies that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. That's the time when this becomes mutually bilateral. Okay, that's the quick bottom line from the front cover to the back cover. So let's go ahead and move on to this part here. All right, so another quick thing here to think about, and I know this is, again, this is the fire hose, right? So it's going to be hard. Don't worry about it if you're not getting it, because I can share it with you in email and such and so, that kind of thing. But try to follow it real close here. In Hebraic bibliology, when I'm using the idea of bibliology, because you know what, in the Hebraic world, in the Jewish world, there's no such thing as theology. There's no such thing as theology. They don't think in terms of those kind of categories. That's a Greek way of thinking. So they don't have a theology. They have a mindset of what it says, but they don't have a theology. So I'm gonna call it bibliology. Is a structure. Hebraic bibliology is structured upon the biblically innate system outlined by the processes of life. Now, if you've ever gone to Bible school, you'll know that within each denomination of Christianity and within each denomination of Judaism, the denominations themselves have their own structured way of looking at the Bible. And this is called systematic theology, right? And that systematic theology, or in Judaism, it's called Talmud. But Talmud, there's also 10 different other books that follow behind Talmud that form the lens through which the Jewish people look at the Bible. But we have the same thing in Christianity. We have our covenant theologies, we've got our dispensational theologies, and we've got our replacement theologies, and we've got all that stuff that we use to view the Bible. But the innate system of the Bible, it doesn't care about any of that. The innate system of the Bible is based upon the structure of life. And when you look at the structure of life, you have, in Genesis chapter 1, you have seeds, and then the rest of history, even up until now, is about how those seeds are fruitful and multiply, and out of that multiplication come families, and out of those families come what we have as the remnant saved people of Yahweh. So you have this process of the growth of a crop of remnant people that at the end time, when Yeshua comes back, he talks about the fields are white for harvest. That is about the time when he comes back, that we are the fields, we are the seed, we are the crop, and when he comes back, there's going to be a judgment. That's what, when there's a harvest, the judgment of the harvest is the threshing. At the threshing, you separate the tares, the weeds, from the real fruit, and at the threshing, you crunch off the stuff that doesn't belong with the actual fruit. When you have grain, you have to thresh it so that you get rid of the husk. You get rid of the stuff that surrounds the grain, and when you get rid of the stuff that surrounds the grain, that stuff is just trash, and they take it and burn it. So harvest and threshing is the time of judgment. And when he comes back, that's when he's going to harvest us and judge all of us. Of course, in Yeshua, our name's already in the book of life, so part of that's already done. But when we get to the people who haven't turned to God, Yahweh, in terms of the new covenant of what we call the New Testament, then they're going to be judged and they're going to be chaff and they're going to be burned up because they didn't repent and accept that covenant. So that is the whole innate system of the Bible. So it starts with the creation of seed, the growth of seed, and there's two parts to this, and we have to remember that whenever we look at the Bible, there's two parts, one and many. There's the one seed, and then there's the fruit of the one seed, which is the family. So those two always have to be considered concurrent. The many or descendant family groups of seed are called goyim. The many, I'll stop right there and we'll talk about that in a second because I want to use the graphics for that. There's a choice between the choice that we had in the garden and ever since then is what creates bad seed as well as good seed. So whatever choices we make in response to God's covenant proposal puts us in the category of being a bad seed or a good seed. And that's part of the harvest idea. Good seed and bad seed. So good seed and bad seed coexist for a time, and that's the time we are in. You have people who are repentant and those who aren't. So you've got, and Yeshua referred to this as tares in the field. And remember his disciples came to him and said, should we harvest the tares right now? He said, no, don't do that. You might damage the real crop. He said, but those tares will be taken care of at the harvest. So that's how that fits in. The other thing we need to realize is that the fruit of good seed has the destiny of being both born and born again. They're born into their corruptible bodies and then born into their incorruptible bodies. And that's a topic we really haven't talked about too much here, but we will. So they have a destiny of being born and born again. And not the last thing, but one of the important things we need to keep in mind is that whenever we read through the Old Testament, the Tanakh, we see how the gardener is Yahweh himself. He's the gardener of his seed, which is us. So the gardener's choice of seed, and we have these scriptures here that talk about his choice of seed. So let's look these up because this is important for us to know what the gardener's choice of seed is. So who would like to go? Anybody, go for Deuteronomy 4:37. There's 4 verses in Deuteronomy here. So take your picks, 4:37, 7:1, 7:6, 10:15, 14:2. And then somebody else get Psalm 81 and Isaiah 50, well, the whole chapter of 52 and Jeremiah 2:21. But we're not going to read the whole chapter, but that's what when we start reading this, you'll see where it's headed.
Is that Isaiah 5 verse 2 or Isaiah 52?
No, I'm sorry. You're right. It's 5:2. Yeah. 5:2.
5:2.
Yeah. My mistake. From this angle, I just see 52.
I understand.
So whoever's got 4:37, go ahead.
Because you love your father, chose the offspring after brought you out of Egypt, by his great power.
Okay, who's talking to who in that verse? Moses to Israel. Right? So he chose Israel. That's okay. The next scripture, 7:1.
Your God brings you into the land where you go to possess it, and casts out many nations before you: the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you.
Are you at 7:6? Let's go to 7:6.
Okay. For you are holy people to Yahweh your God. Yahweh your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession, above all people who are on the face of the earth.
Okay. 10:15.
Only Yahweh took enough pleasure in your ancestors to love them and choose their descendants after them, yourselves, above all people, as he still does today.
Okay, good. How about 14:2?
Because you are a people set apart as holy for Adonai your God. Adonai your God has chosen you to be his own unique treasure out of all of the peoples on the face of the earth.
Very good. Uh, who's got Psalm 88?
Thou didst remove a vine from Egypt, thou didst drive out the nations.
So that was the vine of Egypt. He created the vine out of Egypt and planted it. Yes. Next, Isaiah 5:2.
Oh, 15, verse 15.
Oh, did I miss 15? Okay, go 15.
And the shoot which your right hand has planted, and on the son whom you have strengthened for your.
Thank you. All right. Where we at?
He dug up the stones and cleared them away, planted it with the choice vines, but built a watchtower in the middle of it, and carved out in its rocks a winepress. He expressed it to produce good grapes, but it produced only sour wild grapes.
Okay, so just he's talking about that portion in Isaiah is talking about Yahweh planted a choice vine in the land, right? So Yahweh is the gardener, and he chose that seed. Maybe disappointed in that seed, but that's the seed he chose. Okay, Jeremiah 2:21.
Yet I planted you a choice vine, a completely faithful seed. How then have you turned yourself before me into the degenerate shoots of a foreign wine?
So we see that even though Israel failed, Jacob or Israel is the chosen seed that the gardener chose, regardless of what they did. Yahweh, in his unfailing commitment to covenant, chose Jacob. Okay, that's a very important thing that we need to keep in mind as we go forward in the scriptures. And I also would like to point out here that the last two quotes here we have from Isaiah and Jeremiah, these were the prophets. This was not just the Torah. These are the prophets talking about this stuff too. So nothing has changed. And we'll get down. We'll talk about this a little bit more. But here's another. The last two things on this list are very important. There's a principle of renaming or grafting in between tribes. So this is talking with reference to what we would call Gentiles. Actually, in the first principle here, it's not about Gentiles. It's about actually Jewish people who are within a tribe that marry into a different tribe. How are they grafted into the other tribe, or are they grafted into the other tribe? And we'll look at that in just a moment. And then the last principle here is the principle of renaming or grafting in from the outside. How does a Gentile get grafted in to a tribe of Israel or into Israel? And they do, and we're going to look at scriptures for that. Now, as far as going between tribes, this is a scripture, Numbers 36, 3 through 6. Now, if they are married, and it's talking here about females, starts out talking about females. If a female gets married to a gentleman from a different tribe, now if they're married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and it will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, so that they will be taken from the lot of our inheritance. In other words, if a woman were to get married from one tribe, from Judah, and move into Benjamin, the inheritance for her and her family would now become Benjamin. She would not have any more inheritance. She would give up the inheritance she had under the name of Judah. But that was true of any tribe. I just use those two as an example. So if you move from one tribe to another, you gave up your former name and took on the covering name, the patriarchal name of the other tribe. And that was your inheritance within the grafted in name. But it goes on to talk here about, and of course it talks about the Jubilee there, but I won't go into that right now.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. so that kind of explains what. Well, let me say it real quick. So that doesn't happen immediately. When they get married, they have to wait till the next jubilee, and when that happens, now they're part of the heritage. So they don't get it immediately. It's just a matter of when the next jubilee comes. Then they are genuinely the new tribe under the new tribe. Okay, so this is between a female and a male from a different tribe. But then it goes on in verse 6 to say, "This is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad." Remember that conversation where they were wondering what their inheritance was going to be, right?
There were no sons.
Yeah, right. They had no sons, so it said, "Let them marry whom they think best, but they may, because the name of the tribe always is on the firstborn son. They don't carry the name like the male does. Let them marry whom they think best, but they may marry only within the family of their father's tribe." In other words, these daughters could marry into an inheritance and have their children be part of an inheritance, but it had to be within the tribe in which